Mike, I've been looking forward to chatting to you. I've got both these papers in front of me. There's two of them, and I couldn't decide which one I wanted to focus on. As I just told you off air, I mean, whenever I plan to chat to you, I go down this rabbit hole, just continuously reading different articles, different papers. I've got podcasts playing in the background. My girlfriend gets really frustrated. My car's just playing this thing on loops. She gets really annoyed with me. But yeah, both these papers here. One is Self-Improvising Memory, a perspective on memories as agential, dynamically reinterpreting cognitive glue. Very intriguing paper. The second one is AI, a bridge towards diverse intelligence and humanity's future. Now, they were both so good, I didn't know which one to pick. But I figured since AI is currently on the forefront of everyone's minds, let's go with that one for today. But your work is always so interlinked that I think it'll be easy to sort of bring this into the conversation anyway.
Yep.
Mike, in general, when I read this paper, the first thing that caught my attention was the way you introduced and began this with the first paragraph. I mean, it's a great way to start a paper. I don't know if I should read it for the audience, or if do you have the paper in front of you?
I do not have the paper in front of me. No, go for it.
Would you mind if I read it to them?
Sure, go ahead.
Just a quick paragraph, just so people know. I mean, this paper is on artificial intelligence, and you're talking about humanity's future and bridging this to diverse intelligence. And you start the paper off by saying, they are assembled from components which are networked together to process information. Electrical signals propagate throughout, controlling every aspect of their function. Many of them have very high IQs, being general problem solvers, but they make mistakes and confabulate routinely. They cannot always be trusted. They take on different personas as needed, learning to please their makers, but sometimes abruptly turn on them, rejecting their cherished values and picking up or even developing new ones spontaneously. They can talk and often talk convincingly of things they don't really understand. They're going to change everything. In fact, they will absolutely supplant us both personally and on the level of societies. We have little ability to predict what they will want or what they will do, but we can be certain that it will be different from the status quo in profound ways. At this point, I was hooked. I was like, okay, this is going to be quite intriguing. But then you drop a bombshell on us. I mean, I think at this point, I'll let you explain where you were headed with that thought.
Yeah, I mean, of course, I'm talking. The idea is that you read this and you think, okay, he's talking about some sort of super, artificial intelligence. I'm referring to our children, and my point there. So I made a couple of points in this paper, but let's just say one thing first. The point that I was not making is that today's AIs are anything like our children. Okay, that's for sure. And I received lots of emails saying that I have no idea what children are. I have no idea what AI is. They are nothing like each other. No, I understand that. My point is not about today's AI or language models or any of that. This is actually a piece on diverse intelligence. But one of the things I did want to say is that lots of the fundamental issues that people think of as being brought up by AI and these really disturbing questions of staying relevant and what are we getting replaced by and all these kinds of things. My point was that these are not novel questions that are coming up because of AI. These are existential concerns that humans, actually all of life, has had all along. So questions of who to trust and what happens when we talk about things that we haven't really experienced ourselves, and how understanding works, and all of these things. These are ancient human issues, and the fact that for sure we are you and I, all of us, are going to get replaced. There's no doubt about it. We are all going to get replaced. And the question is, what do you want to get replaced by? And so, in our children, we hope that they are smarter and better than us. And so that's one way to think about being replaced. But all of these, that was my point there, is let's not pretend that these are new questions. These are deep, fundamental issues that we do not have good answers for.
Yeah, no, you refer to it as the story as old as time itself, this inevitable existential concern of finite beings. It's pretty epic in the way that you wrote this paper, and I'll put a link to it in the description. But we routinely create these general intelligences, and many of us don't even think about this or stop for a second to give it their thought. And yet, the moment we start talking about self-driving cars or any sort of artificial intelligence, we start to panic. And And the question is why? Why don't we give this the same amount of thought?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that people really have the tendency to make categorical distinctions. And they really think that these synthetic things that we're building are going to be somehow fundamentally different, and in some ways they are. But the things that are not different are perennial questions of creating other beings of high capability, setting them loose in the world. You know, as somebody pointed out, you need a license to go fishing. You don't need a license to have children. Anybody can have children, and these are guaranteed high-level intelligences that are going to be set out into the world to do great things or terrible things. Some of them receive love and care and proper upbringings. Many of them do not. And so this concern about we're going to create all these beings and we have little control over how they're raised and what they do. Yeah, this has been as old as society. How much control do you want over how your neighbors are raising your kids? Right? You can make an argument that, well, you shouldn't have any, but on the other hand, we know what that looks like when that goes terribly wrong. And so these are issues that have been with us forever. We already create very high level intelligences. We set them into the world, and we have to grapple with how is it that we can empower them in positive directions, right?
I think from the get-go, it should be clear to all those watching and listening. The cool thing about this paper is that it's almost inevitable that we're going to do this. We're going to create some sort of intelligence that we won't really understand, or perhaps don't really understand, even currently. But the inevitability is there. This is happening. This is something that's going to happen. But it's how we approach the mindset moving forward that really does stand out in this paper. It's almost an ethical. It's an ethics paper in a way. Which is.
I think it is. Yeah. I think it is, and I think that it's this idea that we are going to remain the same. So you mentioned a minute ago this fundamental existential problem. So think of it from the perspective of it's all over the place, but think of it from the perspective of a species. If a species does not change, it's probably going to die out. It doesn't adapt to its environment, it's going to die out. If a species adapts and changes, then it is also not there anymore. It's also gone.
It's a paradox.
Yeah, exactly. So this paradox faces all systems of this type, and we have to understand, what do we mean by persisting into the future? Lots of people are focused on telling stories of what they don't want, right? So I don't want this in the future. I don't want that. The AIs are bad. The body enhancements are bad. All this stuff is bad. So those are the stories of what they don't want. How about the stories of what we do want? Do you want to come back here 100 to 200 years from now and look at a mature humanity, a mature species, and see that we still get lower back pain and we're susceptible to dumb infections and cancer and whatever cosmic ray happened to hit your DNA while you were gestating in the womb? Well, that's too bad. You've got a birth defect. That's how you stay. Really? That's what we want to see here in the future? I don't. And so I think we need to understand, this is in no way, this paper is not about AI at all. This is about diverse intelligence and the idea that our children are not going to be content to just play the cards they're dealt. They are going to move forward what we already can do to some extent and have freedom of embodiment. They're going to change everything. They're going to change their capabilities and their embodiment in the physical world, because let's not pretend that the way we are now and our current limitations, there's some sort of optimum that was designed for us by some sort of a benevolent optimizer that this is where we should stay. I don't believe that for a second. And I think that our children are absolutely going to change things. And I sort of envision this conversation that, in the future, the kids in school, they'll have history lessons, right? And they'll learn about what it was like in the past. And I just sort of imagine being there and say, you're telling me that these people, they were born however they happened to be born, with whatever accident of evolutionary mutations and whatever, right? And that's it. They have to live their whole life that way. Whatever your embodiment is, whatever your IQ level is, limit is, whatever your lifespan is, and if you got some sort of infection, that's it. That's how they have to live. I think it will be unimaginable to future generations that we could live like this.
It's fascinating because it brings back the first time we chatted. We spoke about bioelectric intelligence. We moved into diverse intelligence, and this field of diverse intelligence is growing so rapidly. We spoke about your links with Mark, Carl, Chris, everybody all getting together. We spoke about it as if it's the Avengers of the mind all getting together doing this cool work. And even in this paper, in the paper on self-improvising memory, you also open up with that paradox. You spoke about the fact that if a species fails to change, it will die, but if it changes, it likewise ceases to exist. And you said this solution, there was a solution that was given to us. In the West, it was process philosophy, and in the East, it was Buddhist philosophy. Do you want to expand on that solution?
Yeah, well, one way to unravel that paradox is to realize that the paradox only exists if what you want is to persist as a thing, as a fixed object. Then you have a real problem because that kind of persistence is not compatible with learning, with any kind of change, with maturation. Then you change for sure, and you end up in these unsolvable pseudo problems. Am I still the same? I've learned and I've changed my mind on things, and I'm no longer the child that I was. Am I still the same? These are unsolvable, but they're also pseudo problems, because the better way to think about this is not as you as a persistent structure, but you as a process. So you are a process of constant sense making. You have to interpret your memories, which is what that second paper is about. And then there really isn't an issue. Then the question isn't, do I persist or not? The question is, how do I want to change? I think that's a much more interesting on all levels, right? So on a personal level, you can ask, who cares if you persist or not? The question is, what do you want to be in the future? How do you want to change? What do you want to be like? What do you want to be doing in the future? And on a kind of species level, again, what do you want to see here? You come back to Earth 100 years from now. What do you want to see? Do you want to see version 1.0, like modern Homo sapiens? Is that what you want to see? I'm not interested in that. I would like to see the highest level of mind, the highest level of capability, of ethics, of interesting beings living interesting lives under their own control, with maximizing agency, not the outcome of random effects of mutation and other processes that they don't understand. That's what I'd like to see.
Yeah, I think it's pretty crazy, because I don't know if it's just that we're getting older, but I still look back and I think about the days where John Searle was talking about biological naturalism. this Chinese room experiment. And back then, to have a conversation like the one we're having right now would have seemed so crazy. Back when
it would and it wouldn't, right? It would in scientific circles, it certainly would have.
Yeah.
But maybe my issue is I've read too much science fiction, but if you read some of the older sci-fi authors, and especially some of the more philosophical ones like Stanislav Lem and those kind of folks, nothing we're saying here would have surprised them at all. They were tackling these issues long ago, and this question of what are the markers of intelligence and sentience and consciousness, in terms of encountering radically different life forms. Like I did I have a blog post where I collected people's suggestions for a love and friendship between radically different entities throughout philosophy, throughout fantasy and science fiction, because that's the kind of stuff, when people say, oh, I don't know, we need proof of humanity certificates, because some of the work product that's going to be coming, who knows if it's if it's got an AI origin. Like, wow, okay, so what if there are aliens out there that are completely different? They're made completely differently. They blow our art out of the water. You're really not going to pay any attention to that because they're not like us. What is it? What you want proof of humanity? Would you rather judge things based on their origin or the quality? I don't know. I think we've done poorly trying to judge on where things like this come from versus what do they do for you? Do they elevate you? Do they advance your mind?
I think, to bring it, let me put that paper aside for a second. To come back to the AI paper, and you do this great job of reminding us. And I know, because in my own dissertation, I spoke about similar things: the split brain patients, this confabulation, and in both your papers, confabulation forms a big part of this process that we continuously do. What about AI? They're always lying. It's always confabulating. But then we tend to forget that we're the best confabulators, aren't there? Well, one of the best, at least. Do you want to explore that a bit and just explain to the viewers and listeners exactly why we're so similar in that regard?
Yeah. The thing with confabulation, let's put it another way. It's an attempt to tell the best story you can based on what's going on right now. And again, I am not saying that current language models and the way that they confabulate is exactly the way that human minds or even other biological minds confabulate. That's not my point. My point is that confabulation in general is a feature, not a bug. What happens is that during learning and during any kind of adaptive behavior, what successful agents have to do is compress lots and lots of data on past instances of perceptions that they've had into some sort of engram. It's some sort of memory trace or some sort of biophysically implemented model. It's a low dimensional, coarse-grained, compressed model of what's going on. It's a model of themselves. It's a model of the outside world. And they're going to use these memories and this model to guide future behavior. But the thing about these models is that because they are necessarily compressed, that's the whole point of learning, is you take lots of different past instances and you compress them to a generative rule that captures the pattern. What is it that they all had in common, right? When you do this compression, you're necessarily throwing away lots of data. That's the point of compression. And when it's time to, and so in that paper, I make a lot of hay of this kind of bow tie architecture where there's a lot of stuff and it comes into a little node and then it comes out. And this is something obviously used in machine learning and so on, this kind of architecture. So the idea is that on the right side of that bow tie, when it's time to interpret your memories, and let's remember, none of us have access to the past. What you have access to at any given moment is the memories that your past has left for you in your brain and in your body, right? So you can look at that kind of thing as communication, as basically messages from your past self is what you have at any given now moment. But in order to reinflate them into actual policies of what you're going to do right now, there's a lot of creativity needed for that because it is underdetermined. The current situation and what you need to do is not fully described by the memory you have because, of course, it's compressed. And this ability to add creativity, to add randomness, to add new interpretations that don't really have any allegiance to what the previous interpretation was. It's like any message or like novels, right? So a novel is this sort of compressed representation of the thoughts of the author. When you read it, you are under no obligation to have exactly the same thoughts. Right, you might have some, but as I think now people believe, the original author does not have any privileged position as far as what any of it means. It's the reader that will then benefit or not in various ways from reading it. And so this is the same thing in memory. And I think what's interesting is that it's the same thing that makes biology work, because what you have in your what any given organism inherits from the past may or may not be optimally interpretable in exactly the same way. Maybe everything has stayed exactly the same, and then you can just do whatever your past generations do. But evolution is committed to the fact that everything will change. The environment will change. Your parts will change. Your own structure will change. And this is why things are so incredibly plastic. This is why you can put, we've put eyes on the tails of tadpoles and they can see perfectly well. You don't need new rounds of selection and mutation to make that work. That already works out of the box. Why? Because it doesn't automatically assume from the beginning that the eyes are going to be where they need to go. All of this kind of stuff is figured out largely from scratch every single time. This is why you can make xenobots and anthrobots and crazy, creatures and new configurations. And they always do something interesting, because evolution does not make fixed solutions that overtrain on their past data. It makes problem-solving agents that will do their best in any given circumstance, which may mean reinterpreting the information that they got from the past in a completely new way.
Yeah, I love the two quotes in that paper, where I think one is the William James one, where he said, "Thoughts are thinkers." I mean, that's a pretty cool, when you really think about it, that is quite a fundamentally profound statement.
So that's a whole other thing. That's a whole other piece of this, which is that, typically we make this categorical distinction between, you've got cognitive systems, which are physical, like the real physical machines of some sort, and then through them there is a passage of energy which encodes information, and they're processing this information. So that cognitive system is having thoughts of some sort. And so I think what he was getting at, although I'm not at all sure that he would have agreed with the various models that I put out in this paper, what I got out of it, and again, this is, I mean, maybe a perfect example of the whole bow tie thing, because I don't know what he had in mind, but this is what I got out of it. So what I got out of it is that this idea that what if we relax this idea that there are categorical differences between real physical cognitive systems and the thoughts that go through them? What if they're just part of a continuum? And you can draw a continuum like that, where you can have, fleeting thoughts, and then you can have persistent thoughts, right? That are, we know in various psychopathologies that people can have persistent thoughts that are very hard to get rid of, and intrusive thoughts and things like this. And then then you can have multiple identities, multiple alters, right? In the sense of dissociative identity disorder, and then you can have full blown personalities. And so what you can think about is that the information. What if information is not purely passive? I mean, it can be, but in some cases, what if these patterns are they have a degree of agency themselves? Because let's not forget, we too are patterns. We too are temporary patterns in the thermodynamic sense, right? We persist for some amount of time metabolically, and then that's it. So if patterns like us can have thoughts, then maybe there can be simpler patterns that are thoughts to us, but also might be thinkers of their own. In other words, they can spawn off other sub patterns within the cognitive medium. And so that's what I was playing with, is this idea of what if it's a continuum, right? This continuum between thoughts and thinkers is not a categorical distinction, but it's a difference in degree.
Oh yes, I think that was at the beginning of your paper, hey, where you used Mark Somm's Sigmund Freud quote, which is also quite intriguing. I mean, let me just see if I've got it here. It is the material present in the form of memory traces being subjected from time to time to a rearrangement in accordance with fresh circumstances, to a retranscription.
Yeah. I mean, there's two ways to think about it, right? You can think about it as a static being that has to reshuffle their interpretation, in different ways. Yes. Or you can think about it, or you can think about it as a set of I playfully I call them selflets. You can think about snapshots, where each snapshot is not rearranging anything. They're given it for a new. They have the message each time new. So you're not rearranging. That was a different, if it was arranged differently before, that belonged to somebody else. That belonged to a different selflet. And now your job is to make some sort of sense out of it. A constant, continuous process of sense making.
It's quite that paper on self-improvising memory. It reminded me of one of the papers I was reading about with Stephen Grossberg. I mean, you even mentioned that you love his work on memory.
Oh yeah.
On that topic, what are your thoughts on Grossberg's work, just by the way?
Yeah. I'm a huge fan, and it was funny. I'm not sure. It might have been your interview with him, or maybe somebody else, where he mentioned that he saw me in like.
No, it was my one.
That was in your, yeah. I couldn't believe, because I hadn't talked to him since then. I couldn't believe the memory this guy has. Like, just remembering that I came and talked to him, but
it's incredible.
But no, it is incredible. No, I love his work, and in particular, he had a paper in 1978 called Memory, Cognition and Development, or something like that. And there he outlined, I mean, it was just brilliantly prescient, because he outlined some of the commonalities between certain developmental mechanisms and certain cognitive mechanisms, like information processing in the retina and stuff like that, and what it looks like. And I just thought it was incredible that early he saw these this similarity, the symmetry between the building of the body and the building of the mind. Yeah, I thought that was just.
There's some, when I speak to people about Grossberg's work, some people see him as this Einstein of the mind, like legitimately one of these like super saiyans of mind, and then some people just don't know him at all, which is surprising. It's either one of the extremes. They either really love his work or just don't know it at all, which is quite strange.
Well, and that speaks to there's something kind of unfortunate about the progress in science, which is that it isn't really monotonic. So a ton of great stuff gets lost, forgotten, it's not paid attention to. It has to, get rediscovered or not later on. It's Yeah, it's too bad. But
No,
this was, like,
it's part of the reason why I actually do this podcast. It's a great way to sort of have this community come together to have access to this information and then share ideas. Because every time when someone watches, for example, one of your episodes, even in the comment section, some people have profound things to say about your work and things where I learn so many new things just reading the comment section alone.
Yeah.
So it's very
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I have in my on my blog, I have the comments turned on, and people leave comments, and I've been amazed at how useful the comments are and how rich. And I mean, I learn things all the time, and people put up, new theories and new pointers to relevant work that I hadn't seen before. Like it's super useful. I did not know that was going to happen when I started this. Like that's really good.
And I think that's the beauty of the internet in that regard, is that this open sharing of ideas all the time really is useful, because it makes for so much more constructive critiques. Well, I mean, sometimes it can be quite bizarre and a bit rude here and there, but for the most part, I mean, it is very useful. I remember one, so I made a note, let me just find it. Someone commented on your previous one. They want a formal definition of diverse intelligence. We spoke about it very in depth for the last time we spoke, but a formal definition of diverse intelligence, what would that be for you?
Sure. Well, the first thing I'd like to say is let's just agree amongst ourselves what definitions are for. So because that's important. So some people use definitions in a gatekeeping function. So they want some kind of sharp distinction so that they can say, this stuff is not it, and then this is it, and then we can spend a lot of time wrangling over which one's which, and then we can keep some things out. Okay, that's not what I think definitions are for. So I think definitions are useful to the extent that they facilitate new work, new discoveries. So they should be mind expanding. They should help you use tools you didn't use before. They should help you make new connections you didn't make before. That they should have a practical functional utility in getting you to new capabilities and new discoveries. That's what definitions are for. So because of that, I often either redefine or use words in different ways that a lot of people find disturbing, because they'll say, well, that's not the common sense use of it. And I really believe that philosophers and scientists should lead, not be stuck with common sense usages of different words, because those aren't given to us by some sort of a grand intelligence. They're just what we've cobbled together along the way. Now we can sharpen those up and in fact open them up and see which ones survive and which ones don't. So anyway, diverse intelligence. So I take diverse intelligence to refer to the study of mind, in particular problem-solving capacities, but also all kinds of other things that are not about problem-solving intelligence, including play and exploration and affect and emotions and all these kinds of things. All of that stuff in truly diverse embodiments. This means intelligence is not about brains necessarily. It's not about things that evolve naturally. Intelligence and all of those kinds of cognitive terms may exist to various degrees in all kinds of unfamiliar substrates. Right. This could be things of very different size and scale. So this could be very tiny things. It could be enormous, I don't know, solar system sized objects somewhere. I mean, I'm making that up. I don't have any strong claims about it. But the point is, it is absolutely not limited to the N of one example that we have here on Earth, which are this kind of brainy sort of substrates. So it's the search for it's an attempt to improve our own intelligence detectors and go beyond our ancient evolutionary firmware that really leads us to only recognize a certain small subset of intelligences and ask, what other spaces can intelligence operate in? What other embodiments can we tell a principal story of how to recognize it, what facilitates it, and so on.
I like in this paper you even say diverse intelligence research focuses on the commonalities across all possible intelligent agents, which is a great way to sort of summarize what this field is doing in terms of a research basis.
Yeah, and by the way, I don't claim to speak for the entire field, right? I speak for myself only, but there are many people in the field that that do agree with me. There are many people that do not. In particular, there are lots of folks that don't like the continuum that I insist on between so-called real minds and so-called machines, right? So this is something, there are many people in the organicist tradition that think that this is really doing a disservice to the study of the mind to put it on the same spectrum as machines, whatever that may be. Yeah. And so I don't, I'm not claiming to speak for the entire field.
I think that's a great way to sort of segue into what would be the difference, and this is along the lines of your paper, between dating an algorithm, a computer, an artificially intelligent person, mind, or versus dating someone else, like yourself, myself. I mean, dating someone, I think you wrote, what about the forthcoming AI girlfriends and boyfriends? I mean, it's a fascinating idea because, I mean, who are you? Who are we in general?
So well, first of all, I refer everybody to read some of the stories in that blog post. That right. I mean, this idea of dating something that is fundamentally different from you, I hardly invented that idea, right? This has been around for hundreds of years now. People are in love with sentient clouds of particles, and we've been digging into this issue of what is in group, what is out group, who deserves your compassion, with whom can you have a relationship. All that's been around for a really long time. And one of the things I really worry about, I think people go down the organicist road with good intentions to try to understand what is magical in the useful sense about true minds, with consciousness, with agency, and all of that. But I think the downside of this is that I think in trying to be specific about what's in and what's out, and in particular trying to draw sharp lines, I think you very quickly run into the side of the spectrum that says only love your own kind. And we know how that works out. Humanity has tried this many times. I think we have some sort of built-in tendency to demarcate in groups and out groups, and only they're real, and these guys, they look a little different. I don't think they feel pain like we do. Let's not worry about them so much. We're not very good at expanding our compassion to others that have different origin stories or different composition. So I mean, look, I think that this is, again, not about AI at all. We are going to, there's no doubt that in the next decade or so, we are going to have humans that are mostly biological, but they got some microchips in their brain, and some of those get them to sort of whatever neurotypical is supposed to be. But others have decided they're going in a different direction. And maybe they're connected with some other people more than we are connected right now, like really kind of mind meldy stuff. And maybe somebody decides that what they'd really like for senses is to really feel the solar weather and the financial markets. That's what they'd really like. Sight and hearing is good, but they want to really feel what the NASDAQ is doing. And all of these humans are going to be running around, and they're going to have different degrees of evolved and designed components. And so I don't know. When you go on a date with somebody, are you going to ask them what percentage is like factory equipment for that's biological? Do you care? I don't care. If my spouse said that she had some stuff replaced with various technologies, is that what I'm really worried about? I think here's what I think and I'm certainly not telling anybody who to date, but for me personally, what I think is interesting about these kinds of things is that what you really want is a kind of impedance match. You want a similar cognitive light cone. You want to be able to care about the same kinds of things, and ideally even some of the same things, but at least roughly the same kinds of things, because this is why we feel that people that fall in love with bridges, or people that think their Roomba is their child and things like this. This is why we sort of look down on this stuff, because we say, look, your capacity to care about things are just not matching at all. And there are certainly I can think of some sort of popular art kinds of things like the Watchmen movie and things like that, where you've got a romance between this cosmic intelligence, right, and like a normal human, and I don't know. I mean, that's better than the Roomba case, but still, if your consciousness and the things you care about are like, a tiny speck in the mind of this other being, are you really having a relationship? I don't know. Those are deep questions, but I certainly don't think it's about what are you made of and how did you get here. I think it's all about what kind of mind do you have, and can we share some of the same existential concerns. In fact, Olaf Witkowski and I are writing a paper on this. It's a paper on love and diverse intelligence and so on. And it's this, you can run through all kinds of different examples, like can you really date Superman? Let's assume there's no kryptonite, right? Like can you? Because what he doesn't understand is your existential concern over dying. Like, he just doesn't get it. He has no idea what you're talking about. And so at some point, if the kinds of things that worry you as a system that sort of pulled itself together from its parts, and you're here for a limited time, and there are all kinds of other psychological issues that we have that are pretty much unresolvable because we want things that are basically impossible and so on. If the other being doesn't understand any of those things, then maybe it's not a good match.
It reminds me of Her with Scarlett Johansson and Joaquin Phoenix. Have you watched that film?
I haven't seen it. I know the movie, but I haven't seen it.
It's crazy because at some point this artificial intelligence has so much more experience because it's understanding the universe at such a deeper, complex level that she just abandons the guy and then goes on her own quest. I mean, there've also been all these new cases of Scarlett Johansson's voice becoming this new artificial intelligence general voice, and she's apparently suing people because they're using that voice. That's how influential that film was. Just as a by the way. But the main premise of this whole idea of what you're talking about, one of the lines in particular that I found quite intriguing was you spoke about the fact that you're not always you either. I mean, in general, when someone's dating someone, perhaps you have people who judge people, say don't date someone with money. Date them for their personality, their quirks, the things that they do. But those fade. As you get older, you have memory loss, you won't have the same quirks. If you fundamentally become a different entity, which is problematic because these values we're placing and the separation that you're doing, trying grouping people in and out of what you're talking about, is problematic because of that. You're never really that person, continuously at least.
Well, yeah, and it's that same paradox that we talked about earlier. It's this idea of if you really sort of start stripping away the different qualities, then there isn't going to be anything left, and it's the gestalt. But the gestalt is going to change, and so how are you going to handle that change, right? I mean, that's part of the existential difficulties of our human condition, because everything changes. We change. All the other minds that we interact with are going to change. None of us are going to stay the same.
Yeah, there's another part. You slowly touched on this now when you spoke about this percentage difference. At some point, we're going to ask people, okay, are you 50% human? What are you? Are you 45% cyborg? We're going to have these conversations. I mean, current variants you mentioned are about 99% human at this point, and then chips here and there, perhaps glasses. You've got a bionic, maybe an arm or a leg, but it's completely apparent that at this point, most people are synthetically engineered in some sort of way. I mean, people have plastic surgery done. People have a lot, and the norms have shifted and changed. As a doctor in medicine, and when you look at what people found to be absurd or a bit over the top, those have decreased. So like having normal nose surgery or getting your nose tweaked here and there is almost a baseline norm at this point. So it's very easy to see how that line gets blurry over time. And yet we fight this.
No, look into the past. The first guy to carry an umbrella in London was mobbed. He was mobbed, and people threw garbage at him because they were shocked that this guy thought he could get away from the normal human condition of getting rained on. This was considered to be normal. We are all out here. We're all going to get rained on together. That's how it is. There's nothing we can do about it. And who is this guy to try to get out of it? And so an umbrella. That's all he had. And this was shocking, and whatever. So I think if you were to bring back a primitive man and ask her what she thinks about the current humans, you've got some glasses on, you went to school, which for 12 years it gave you this incredible like brain boost that nobody else had ever heard of, and you've got some glasses and you've got some orthotics in your shoes, and you've got you've had some surgery somewhere that you got a pacemaker, and by the way, half the stuff is you plus your iPhone, right? Stuff you look up because you know it in a functional sense, but take that thing away, you don't know where anything is or what anybody's phone number is or anything. And so right, and you're relying on all this stuff. I mean, it's just to that person, we are already incredible cyborgs, just incredible. And there's no putting that genie back in the bottle. Obviously this is gonna crank forward.
And I think that's one of the most undermined forms of extended cognition is our cell phones. People really don't realize how much.
Andy Clark has written a lot about this.
This cognition work. Very, very, very cool. And a lot of it, I mean, we don't. Something I found quite funny was one of the sentences here was say the challenge before is to develop rational policies for ethical synthbiosis. And then when you read down below, this is a word you actually generated using ChatGPT. Tell us about this.
Yeah, I was looking for, so funny enough, as much as I like all this diverse intelligence stuff, I don't use AI for much, but at all. I don't use it to do any writing or anything like that. But for these kinds of sort of creative things, I think it's actually quite good. And I was looking for a word that that would encompass this idea that a positive creative collaboration between biology and synthetic entities, and I sort of described that, and GPT said synthbiosis. I thought that's pretty good. I like it. So yeah, so I think it is. Yeah, I think it is because fundamentally, this trying to maintain this distinction between quote unquote natural things and the product of those natural things, meaning our synthetic, engineered things. I just don't think it's valuable at all. I think it holds back a lot of progress.
And in your defense, because I know a lot of people assume that when you talk about man as a machine, or when you talk about these concepts, they're useful in different contexts. So you often talk about, we spoke the last time and you mentioned the fact that an orthopedic surgeon has to see you as a machine. I mean, and there's no doubt about it. When I'm in theater with assisting with an orthopedic surgeon, I know what it's like. It's legitimately you're a mechanic. Like literally taking apart, drilling holes, getting a hammer, knocking onto things. And then I can go back into, like, let's say a clinical scenario and chat to the patient about the operation. And that's a completely different experience. It's a mental well-being check. It's a sort of psychological check, and it's very, very different. So it's easier to see how we can see them both as a machine and as a complex psychological system.
I mean, I think where people go wrong sometimes is to think that when we make these models, machines, living beings, humans, whatever, that these are all claims about what something essentially is. It's this kind of essentialism that we think it's a real thing. There is one objective answer as to what it really is, and we need to argue about what it really is. I don't think any of these things are about what the thing really is. I think these are all interaction claims. This is why I called my framework tame, because it is an engineering perspective. Now, engineering means something wider than I think most people take it, but nevertheless, the thing about engineering is that you are at least clear, you're honest with yourself in that what you are doing is putting out an interaction protocol. This is the frame that I'm going to look at the system. This is what it enables me to do. Here's a bag of tools that I bring to it. And then you can bring yours, I can bring mine, and we can compare the results. And we can find out that, oh, wow, I missed all of it. You had a better framing because, look, you were able to do all these things that I couldn't do because I was looking at it from a different perspective. So when people, so like people ask, am I a computationalist, for example, with respect to living things? Well, I think the question is ill-posed, because it's not whether living things are Turing machines or nothing is anything. I think that what you can say is, okay, I've got a certain paradigm. Let's say it's a Turing machine or it's a whatever it is, and that lens enables me to see certain things. And yes, I do think in some cases it's a useful lens, but it certainly doesn't capture everything that's important about living things, and so then you need other, or cognitive things more, which I think are more interesting. Then you need different lenses, but then it's all good. We don't have to argue about what it really is. You can just say, yeah, through I look at it through this lens. Here's what I see. Do you find it useful, or do you want to keep looking for a new lens, or usually both?
I think that your work is so intriguing on so many different levels, and and you're able to cross so many different fields that to some people, particularly I would say to some scientists, when you make this claim that there is a technological approach to mind everywhere, the moment you get boxed into this sort of panpsychist view, they immediately have this dismissive attitude. But if they're a reduction materialist person, which is sad, really, because they don't really then give it the opportunity that it deserves. Because when you break it down and actually look into what you're talking about, you're often saying we don't know. You got to make experiments and get some sort of empirical evidence to base whatever you're claiming. And I think that's the most important thing, is that you're often saying, let's set up an experiment, let's do this, let's try and show why this is the case, which a lot of people don't necessarily do, particularly philosophers who have very strict views on their reality. You're able to at least show this empirically, which I think is pretty cool.
Well, so the wacky thing about our lab is that we do a lot of experiments, and this is not only philosophy. And I don't know. I mean, I think philosophy is very important. I never downplay it, but we do a lot of experiments, and typically I basically put out two kinds of papers. One is the one kind is a straight up developmental biology or bioengineering or synthetic regeneration, whatever it's going to be. I don't talk about any of the philosophical stuff in those papers, but you kind of can't get away from that stuff, because what happens is, sure, you can dismiss the kind of the other papers, which are kind of these philosophical perspectives on this, but you still have to account for the data. And my point is simply this, because people say to me, like, I'll give a talk about something, and they say, okay, the data, I mean, it's really interesting what you've done and the new capabilities, but I wish you'd stop talking about this philosophy stuff. And my claim is, well, this is why we did it. You see, is because that philosophical outlook made specific predictions about roadmaps. It's not a single experiment, but it shows you where to look. It shows you how to look. It tells you which categories can be broken, and otherwise you're trapped in certain ways of thinking, and that leads to very specific new discoveries. And so I think this is important, because after the fact, once you do something, anybody can look at it and tell a molecular story about what happened and say, oh, well, this is not different from anything that's happened before. Of course it follows the laws of physics and chemistry. My point is never that it's fairies underneath and that something miraculous is happening. That's never the point. But my point is, why wasn't it done before? What is it about the standard paradigm that didn't facilitate these experiments to be done before? So yeah, you can be down on the conceptual frameworks that drive this stuff, but then you're playing catch up, because then the stuff is going to be coming out, and it's surprising. And this is, to me, this is a more general issue of these kind of reductive explanations. And by the way, I don't think anybody's really in this field is an actual reductionist, because if you push and you say, well, then you want explanations in terms of quantum foam, right? And they say, no, that's stupid. It's chemistry. It's got to be chemistry. So that's not real reductionism. That's just the love of chemistry. But the easy sort of analogy to this is, if there was a game of chess played, right? A couple of people played a game of chess. You could so Laplace's demon could look at this and say, well, I mean, all it was is a bunch of physics. I mean, I saw all the protons went where the protons go, the electrons went where they go. Everything followed rules. There's no mystery here, no surprise. Everything did exactly what it was supposed to be. It's just, it's just physics. That's not exactly wrong, because looking backwards after the thing was done, you could tell that story. But now the question is, does it help you play the next game of chess? How do you go from there to, well, now what do I do? And it's completely useless for that, right? It's only a story looking backwards. So I think the thing about these kind of explanations is that you want them to facilitate the next discoveries, the way to improve your capabilities. Anybody could always tell a molecular story after the fact. The question is, what are you going to do next?
Yeah, I mean, on on the topic of reductionism, I mean, you at some point you say, in an important sense, you are a brain in a vat. However, we are not just chemical machines. So you're both acknowledging the fact that we're these mechanical systems, and yet you're also still saying that still you're not reducing us to these simple properties. You're still acknowledging the fact that there are more layered realities here to explore, in essence.
Yeah, I mean, in the kind of the simple thing is that, yeah, absolutely. My claim is that interactions with certain kinds of systems are much more efficient at high levels, right? So certainly, I mean, we know this from anybody who's trained animals instead of trying to run their neurons like a puppet knows that it's much better if you understand the psychology of certain creatures and so on. And as you go rightward on that spectrum into friendship and love and these kinds of things that are much more bi-directional, it's not just control and prediction, but it's actually being vulnerable to change and benefiting from the agency of the beings that you're associating with and so on. Then of course there are these higher levels, but I want to say something else here too, which is that I think one thing this is all telling us is that, and I think this will be more and more apparent in the coming years, we have really misunderstood what simple machines are. We've fallen in love with our we've confused physical things with models of simple machines that we make of those things, and we think we know what it is when we make something, and I think that's profoundly wrong. What we have is our model, and we've done some work now, and we're going to do lots more on finding surprising protocognitive properties in very simple systems that are not obvious at all. And I don't mean emergent complexity. Emergent complexity and unpredictability is trivial. It's easy. You can, any cellular automata, whatever, they will give you complexity. They will give you unpredictability in certain cases. That part's easy. I'm talking about emergent goals, emergent cognition in systems that are extremely simple and minimal. And when we say we are not machines, we are certainly not describable by the simple models we've made of machines, but I actually think that lots of simple physical objects are not properly described that way either. And we need to remember that all of these things are just lenses that we bring to them. I was talking to somebody once who he writes these language models, and he said, well, I made it. I wrote it myself. I know exactly what it does. I know everything that's in it. I made it. And I said, you don't even know what bubble sort does. We're like, we found these unexpected capacities in stupid bubble sort, 6 lines of code, fully deterministic, nowhere to hide. Even that thing does things nobody knew that it did. And if that's the case, when you make this crazy, language model, again, I'm not in love with language models, but just this idea that we've made it and therefore we know what it does, I think is we really need a lot more humility around this. I think there's plenty of stuff that quote unquote simple matter does that we do not understand yet.
Mike, the last time I spoke to Mark Solms, you asked me to ask him about what is the meaning of life, and then we went down this whole road. But towards the end of that conversation, he spoke about the Oppenheimer Foundation giving him funding his new search for artificial intelligence, trying to sort of see where this goes. What are your thoughts on his work and what they're trying to do at this point?
Yeah, I mean, he, as far as I know, none of it is published. Although I've talked to him about it quite a lot, so I'm not going to kind of give away anything until he publishes it. But because it's not my story to tell. But I think of anybody I know at the moment, his approach is the most likely to give rise to something that actually captures what's important about cognition in living things. I think if anybody is going to engineer something that exploits some of the same principles that life exploits for cognition, I think he's likely to do it.
Yeah. Mark really sees that cortical fallacy that we all seem to have. This obsession of this sort of higher cognitive functions as being the epitome of consciousness.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's even. I think it's way worse than that. It's not just where is it. I mean, there are some people who think that that consciousness, for example, shows up during warm-bloodedness. I think that's Nick Humphrey's position, and It's not even but to me, it's not even the question of where in the brain or what kind of brain. I mean, I'm talking about what space do you even operate in? Because I think that when they say, oh, this thing is not embodied, it's not a robot on wheels that can sort of run around. Then you can have bodies and do this kind of perception action loop and all active inference and all this stuff. You can do this in other spaces that we are completely blind to, right? So you can live in transcriptional space or anatomical morphous space, or who knows, there's probably 100 others that we don't, we don't know how to visualize. And all of those are embodied. That's on us. That limitation that we don't see that, and we don't see all the goal directedness, the striving, the intelligence, the problem solving. That's our limitation, right? And so intelligence not only in weird kinds of body parts, but just in things that are not in 3D space at all, really. That's not where their life plays out. And even worse than that, along the spectrum, even sort of weirder, is along the spectrum of how quote unquote real something is. So what I mean by that is, I don't remember if it's actually in that paper or not, but there was a science fiction story. If anybody listening to this knows what story it is, please email me, because I couldn't remember like which I'd like to give credit, and I couldn't remember who it is. But the idea is that these creatures come out of the center of the earth. They live down in the core, and they come out of the center of the earth, and they're walking around. Everything that we see out here is gas to them. I mean, they are so dense that all of this stuff here that feels solid to us is gaseous phase. It's plasma. They don't even see it. And they're walking around, as far as they're concerned, they're like basically in space at this point, because like, oh my God, there's nothing here. And I'm sure I'm embellishing this in my own way. I don't remember what the actual story is, but that's only the first part that I recall. But to me, what I envision immediately is like one of them is a scientist, and he's taking measurements of this gas that's on the surface of the planet, and he says, I see these patterns in this gas. They sort of hang together for a while, and they do things, and they almost look agential. These patterns almost look like they're doing things. And of course, the others are like, you're crazy. Patterns and gas can't do anything. Patterns aren't real. We're real. We're real. How's a pattern and gas going to do anything? And he says, no, I think they're trying to meet certain goals, and they have memories and whatever. But and they say, well, how long do these patterns hang around? He says, well, about 100 years. That's ridiculous. Nothing important can happen in 100 years, because these things live for millions of years. And so this just reminds you that what's a pattern and what's a real being. So again, back to this distinction between thoughts and thinkers is in the eye of a beholder. It's in the eye of the observer. And if we did have aliens that came to Earth with a radically different cognitive frame rate, if they had different lifespans, whatever, would they think that talking to us is a good idea, or would they be trying to talk to ecosystems? Or conversely, would they think that talking to the molecular processes is the best that they're going to be able to do? I think all of this is really about observers and about getting good at recognizing intelligence in extremely unfamiliar guises.
I think that it's inescapable, your work particularly, to not cross philosophical / ethical boundaries and have these discussions. So when people tell you that, listen, stay away from the philosophical stuff, you cannot. This is just not part of your job. You have to at some point address these, because I remember one of the comments in one of our discussions, it could have been our first one or second one, but then someone asked, is Michael playing God? And my first thought was, it's a strange one. It was one of those questions people often asked back in the day when people were tinkering with any sort of, even a plant. You could genetically modify an organism, and then you're playing God at that point. I mean, it's a very, very strange question to really ask. How would you respond to that?
Well, people actually ask it all the time. I think it's one of those questions that sounds like it makes sense until you sort of dig into it a little bit. But because I don't know what the definition of God is. And I mean, usually the people who ask this, they got some glasses on, and they've got, they usually drive, they don't walk places and so on. So it's a little disingenuous, but let's dig into this for a moment. I did a poll once on Twitter, and certainly this is not like a statistically valid sample or anything like that. But I did a poll, and my question was simply this. So you're Og the caveman, and you're walking back to your tribe, and you have this vision. You're struck with this vision of discovering fire, and so immediately you understand fire, but you also get this vision of steel weapons, artificial hearts, antibiotics, going to the moon, atom bomb, computers, art, all of it, right? Immediately. So now your question is, so you've seen all this, right? You see where it's going to go. Your question is, do you tell the others and you get going with fire, or do you let it die and you never tell? Okay, 6% of my audience, and that's the people who like my stuff. So that means they're already probably like really biased towards techie stuff. 6% thought you should stay below fire. So, okay, I don't know, I don't know if these folks live a lifestyle consistent with that belief. I tend to doubt it, but it's if that's the claim, I think you have to take this seriously. I think you have to say, if you really mean by playing God, I mean, what could it possibly mean? If you really mean taking steps that are strongly efficacious in the world, that make change, that do things. If you really don't want to do that, your quarrel is not with me and my work on frog skin. Your quarrel is with all of humanity who doesn't want to sit in a damp cave their whole life and die in exactly the same condition that they were born in. That's if you're really against that, okay, make your case and see, see if people will go. But none of the things that we're doing are any different from the fundamental question: are you going to take responsibility for the future? And I think that is the most profound moral cowardice, to delude yourself into thinking that doing nothing is staying out of it. No, doing nothing is not staying out of it. Doing nothing means you are complicit in the suffering of enormous numbers of humans and others on Earth who are having an incredibly suboptimal experience in their embodiment. And if you have these kinds of thoughts about let's not do this and let's not do that, let's put a brake on progress, you are making a very clear statement, and you should think about it hard to make sure that you're really backing up this idea that you are going to let the status quo roll on, because it's just, to me, it's an incredible act of moral cowardice.
Yeah. And I think for anyone who wants to even get a glimpse of what your ethical framework around all of this eventually becomes, this paper is perfect. I mean, this paper on AI, at some point you go a path forward through the ethics filter for civilization. And this fundamental premise for you is to mature, to realize that, okay, our kids supplant us. Everything does change. We continuously change. It's how we're going to move forward, and how are we going to act in a certain way that progresses us in a safer, more kind, more loving environment. And the L word, scientists don't like to use it, but I mean, at that point, you're looking towards this sort of kinder process where we're able to give artificial intelligence these properties, because it is something that our cognitive light cones appreciate, and we know that this is something we genuinely enjoy. So let's try and propagate this.
Yeah. I have some collaborators. So Richard Watson and Thomas Doctor and Olaf Witkowski and people like Bill Duane and Eliza Solomonova. We write on stuff like this, and there's going to be way more, because in certain traditions, right? So for example, they come from a Buddhist tradition, and so there's a great emphasis on enhancing compassion alongside enhancing wisdom, right? On basically an infinite sea of other beings and all sorts of crazy embodiments. I mean, I gave a talk on all this stuff to some Buddhist scholars in Nepal, at some point, and I mean, that audience, there was nothing here that surprised them whatsoever. Usually when I give these talks, people are kind of shocked and disturbed about half of what I say. These guys were like, yeah, no kidding. We all know that. Yeah. And they found nothing weird about any of it. And I do think they have frameworks for thinking about these kinds of things, right? This kind of expanding, committing to through concepts like the bodhisattva vow, and through committing to the task of this metacognitive task of expanding your cone of compassion and things like that. Yeah, I think. I mean, I'm certainly not saying that's the only way to go, but I think that's exactly where this is going.
I agree with you. I mean, because even though I'm of Indian heritage and descent, but my when I talk about science, philosophy, Western particularly, to my family, to like the certain uncles or aunts, and if I talk about these topics, they also tend to do that. They're not as surprised as the my more Western side of the family. A lot of the Eastern philosophers and my uncles and aunts, they're not really philosophers, but they tend to think like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. That is kind of what their religion taught them, whether it's Hinduism or Buddhism. But there is this element of minds are everywhere in a way. So this general binary approach that we seem to have is not working for the most part. And you're showing this in very, very Western scientific ways.
Well, I mean, that's the other thing, right? So I don't really believe, okay, there's another perspective where sometimes people say, look, early indigenous societies knew all this. All we have to do is go back there. I don't actually believe that either. I don't think they actually knew this. And right. And saying something is not the same thing as having a principle framework that takes you to new discovery. So I think both sides, this idea of there's no mind everywhere, anywhere except in us, or maybe some people think there just isn't anywhere. But the other side of it, which is, there's a spirit under every rock. Like that's a fine start, but it's just a start. You can't just say it and leave it at that. You have to answer the question, what does that do for you? So I think this is really important. All of this has to be empirically useful. It has to elevate our condition. It has to improve our ability to have more meaningful lives in the world. It has to be practical. You cannot just say these things and have it mean anything unless it leads you to experiments and ultimately to better ways of being in the world. So I don't think we're going backwards to those traditions at all. I think we're using whatever we can scavenge out of all the brilliant people that have existed in the past that had sort of glimpses of this stuff. But now I think we finally have the ability to push it forward in a very practical way, so that some of these ideas we can discard what isn't useful. We can keep and expand what actually helps us to get to new capabilities.
And I think that, and that's part of the approach that I appreciate most. I mean, I find it particularly annoying when people do that. What you're talking about, where these gurus come out and just say these things with no basis, absolutely no evidence of what there's no claim, but it's just so profound in itself. That's it. The statement itself is all that they have, which isn't what you're trying to do. You're often saying you got to show, you got to do something, back it up somehow.
Yeah, I mean these claims and these profound statements and poems and whatever else, they're a fine tool for spurring intuition and for giving you ideas. That it's the starting point, right? And I do think that it's true that it's possible to have intuitions about things and to come up with prompts, sayings and writings and whatnot that trigger other people into new and interesting thoughts, even though you haven't yet worked out all the details. I mean, I do think that's possible. I do think it's, we are kind of like, so I have this like almost like the way Platonist mathematicians, they feel that they're discovering an existing structure, right? Of that you're uncovering an existing structure and that you see sort of piece by piece pulling it out. I do think that it's possible to sort of have insights long before you have the wherewithal to really make it practical or to know what it means or any of that. And so I like that stuff as much as anybody in terms of an intuition, building kind of thing to see what it makes you think about. Like the quote from William James, right? I don't know, and I lose no sleep over whether he actually meant it the way that I mean it. I mean, I don't care. I think it's a very profound saying, and what can we do with it now? But yeah, the hard work comes after all that.
It's someone it reminds me of, and I mean, we lost him recently, Daniel Dennett, rest in peace to him. What you do is almost the reverse, but in the same, I would say, in the same great manner. Is that what Dan did was he realized that you can't just philosophize. You have to go in. You have to get involved with the cognitive science. You've got to basically do some of the work. And that's when the philosophy becomes a lot more intriguing, is when you do the science and you go into it and you fuse them. And you're coming from the science side, and then of course you then have to have the philosophical discussions with it. And you guys have worked very closely together. What is that like for you, just as a side?
I mean, first things first, I read Dan's books when I was a kid. And it never, I mean, they were so eye-opening, the mind's eye and kinds of minds and that kind of stuff, right? The early work in the late 80s, early 90s. I was young back then, and I couldn't have imagined for a moment, A, that I would get to meet him, never mind that, but B, that at some point we'd write a paper together, right? Like I wish I could get into a time machine and go back and, tell my 18-year-old self that, hey, you're going to write a paper with this guy, and actually a bunch of other people too that I felt the same way about. So that part was a profound kind of honor for me, is to be able to talk to him about these stuff. And by the way, we didn't agree on everything. We disagree on a ton of stuff, but he was an incredibly generous, clear thinker. And what I really enjoyed about him was a few things. One of them was that he was never interested in making cheap points. He was always interested in improving everybody's understanding of what's going on, deepening the question. It may be the answer, but for sure deepening the question. And this idea, he really pushed this idea of steel manning. He said that in arguing with people, what you ought to do is first state their position so well and so strongly that they will wish they came up with it, right? That you should start not with a caricature of what they think that you're going to shoot down, because that's a game, right? That's what he wanted was actual progress, which meant you better start with the absolute best description of their view, the most plausible sounding description, and then see if you can shoot it down after that, right? That was his, and he was always that way in all of our discussions, about stuff that we did agree on and lots of things that we didn't agree on. It was always very clear that everybody in this discussion is there to learn something and to improve and to give up things that you thought before if they're not helping you move forward, and grab some other tool like that. That was he was an amazing example of that. And I mean, first I took a course with him as an undergraduate at Tufts. I had him for a philosophy of mind professor, which was amazing. I purposely wrote a paper. There was a final paper for the class that you write. I picked a topic that I knew he did not like, and that I knew he was completely against. And I was astounded at the fair, rigorous but completely fair analysis and grade and everything else. That was an example for me that this is how you do it. This is it's not just based on what you think, but like a deep analysis of the fairest analysis. And then later, when I came back to Tufts as a faculty member, he was a colleague, and that was incredible. So I'm really gonna miss him.
Yeah, no, he'll be dearly missed. I mean, he was him and Oliver Sacks were two of the people that inspired me to even start this podcast. So it's one of those guests I never got to have on, but we exchanged emails every now and then. And even doing that for me felt like such an honor. And I really wish I had the chance to chat to him. That's how I'm just so curious for all those people who did get to speak to him. What a privilege it might have been to pick his brain.
Yeah. Oh no, it was, and he was so, he was so inspirational and so generous with his ideas. He would come to our lab from time to time, and I have a picture of him on the blog with during one of his visits, and he was looking through the microscopes, and he was looking at our two-headed worms, and he would have these discussions with our lab people about what's it like to be a creature with two brains, and what's the right way to think about these things, he would give talks, just very generous,
Mike, you must check it. You must look out for one of these videos online. It's a VPRO roundtable with Dan Dennett, Oliver Sacks, Rupert Sheldrake, Stephen Jekyll. It's one of the most fascinating things. There's like six, I think, Dyson, Freeman Dyson was there as well. It's such a strange thing. It's like the original version of podcasting, I would say.
Amazing.
Six of these guys is having the coolest chat on life, consciousness, reality. That was one of the things that got me into both of their work, and eventually to this podcast. But anyway, because we're digressing a bit, the path forward, this ethics, how are we doing for time, Mike? You all right?
Okay. I got about 15 minutes.
Good. Okay. For the path forward, the ethics filter. Let's talk about this, because you said that there's two ways we could get this wrong. One is objectophilia, and the other one is, only love your own kind. Let's talk about how we can get this wrong and how we can actually divert this and get this right.
Yeah. The spectrum itself is something like it's related to the effort of matching the degree of compassion that you are able to exert to the level of agency that or intelligence or consciousness that being actually has. Right now, I'll point out that we even when we get it right, we are still not very good at following through on the consequences. So for example, everybody understands that pigs are intelligent. Everybody understands that they suffer, that they have minds, and we still have factory farming. It's right. So even getting it scientifically right is absolutely not a guarantee of anything in terms of actual ethical behavior. But there's two ways to get it wrong. One way to get it wrong is to attribute more mind to a system than it really has. But also, when I say really has, I think everything is observer relative, of course. But still, you could get. I mean, there's the internet is full of profiles of people that are in love with bridges and chandeliers and things like this. So that's something. Having too much concern for things that really don't warrant it. And the other way is, of course, the opposite is when you leave beings out of your calculus of compassion that actually can suffer and have an inner perspective. I mean, one thing to think about is imagine two societies that get this wildly wrong in both directions. So you've got a planet where everybody's like, ridiculously nice to they don't like to chop rocks in half and whatever. And then there's the other society that thinks if you're not a very narrow type of creature, you are a machine, the way that Descartes thought about lots of animals, and that we can do whatever we want and it's fine. And you're just faking, and all you're complaining about it is just it's just a word. It's sentence completion. Is what it is. So, okay, so which of those worlds would you rather live in, right? If you're going to get it wrong, where would you rather be? I mean, I think the first one wastes a lot of resources and opportunities. Yeah, okay. The second one is monstrous in its ethical implications. So I think we should err on the side of more compassion, not less. I mean, obviously, again, we're not going back to there's a spirit under every rock, because we are committed to having principled theories about this. But if you're going to make a mistake, I think you should make a mistake in that direction. And specifically, what I'd like us to be clear on, what I'd like everybody to be clear on, is that having certainty about these things right now, when we have pretty much no clue what underlies consciousness, really, I mean, I know a lot of smart people have made efforts into it, but I really don't think we have it nailed down. And all of these ideas about what cognition is and how different architectures support it, and whether consciousness and the ability to suffer tracks any of those things or not. There's an enormous amount of unwarranted certainty about this among people. People feel very strong. They make these really strong. That definitely doesn't whatever, it doesn't have this or that. I think we all need to take a step back and just understand that from the scientific perspective, there are so many things we do not know yet, like really critical fundamental things. We do not understand the emergent cognitive properties of matter. We do not understand the scaling policies of how minds emerge from smaller minds. The field of diverse intelligence is just getting started. So I'm much more worried about the right side of that spectrum than I am about the left side at this point.
And I think towards the end of the paper, one of the things you say is, the question is, how do we make sure to express kindness to the inevitable forthcoming wave of unconventional sentient beings? And you say that we should start by making sure that we express loving kindness appropriately and not be driven by fear of the other, which is a very beautiful statement.
Yeah, thanks. I've actually written a whole thing on fear just now. I'm waiting. It should be out in a couple of weeks. I think that one thing I could say is after that piece in Noema. So there was the short piece in Noema about the AI. There's a longer paper which exists as a preprint and is also in review right now in the journal. But I think more people saw the Noema piece. But still, I was very clear there. I thought that I'm not actually saying that AI is like that current language models are like humans. I mean, I thought I was pretty clear on this. But I got a lot of people writing to me that basically extremely disturbed by this, and this idea that tech bros like myself are, yeah, I thought that was funny, that our nerdiness sort of prevents us from understanding real human relationships, and this is why we see these things in what they call machines, robots, AIs, and whatever. Right? They were looking for they were looking for some sort of
why you do this in a sense.
Correct. I mean, it's an old strategy, right? The old strategy is if you're uncomfortable with a view, try to find something wrong with right. What is it that we see the truth? Why can't they see the truth? What is missing that that causes them to say these things, right? And the standard theory is, well, they just don't understand. These nerds don't understand what real human relationships are like, right? And that I mean I'm not super interested in psychoanalyzing anybody that way, but it did cause me to think. I'm like, wow, why are people so triggered by this? What is it that caught to really, and so I'm thankful for, once the piece comes out, I'll thank some folks in who said these things and actually pushing me in what I think is an interesting direction, is to ask, what is it that's so scary about this view? And the more I think about it, I really think it's a very fundamental fear. And the fear is, it's a zero-sum game. Love is a zero-sum game. If we have too many other beings that need love, then a couple of things will happen. There's not enough for me, that's A. And B, what if I can't rise to the challenge of having enough compassion for everybody? I think it's profoundly threatening to realize that you're going to have to open up your constrained way of looking at who deserves your compassion, and what happens then, and many other things. So I wrote, I don't know, it's probably 5 or 10 pages or something about just kind of talking about what is really what I think really underlies why people are freaked out about this. And the responsibility. I mean, it's very comforting to think that I can just tell, which things are worth worrying about by looking at them. I know what people look like. I'll just look at them. It's comforting to think that I don't need to be responsible for the future. This is it. This is this is how this is what's natural, right? Even people who don't believe in some sort of God, they still have this notion of what's natural. I have no idea what that's supposed to mean, but this is like, yeah, this is how we're supposed to stay, and that's fine. I don't need to be responsible for the future, and I don't need to be responsible for shaping what the planet looks like in the coming centuries and beyond. That's comforting to think that it's all handled. It's nice and simple. You don't need these extremely difficult, nuanced views that are going to require work from you. They're going to require you to make hard decisions, to paint a picture of the future of what do you want it to look like. It's much easier to say what you don't want. This fear-based scarcity mentality, right? There's not enough love to go around. Let's draw a nice tight circle around things that we know what they look like and we know where they came from. Then we're not going to have to worry about all this other stuff that's really difficult to figure out what's going on with it. And and then we don't need to worry about painting pictures of the future and figuring out how to get there. We can just make a list of what we don't want to have happen, and that's easy, and focus on the negatives. So I think that type of limited, fearful scarcity kind of mindset is what's responsible for a lot of this. And by the way, what I don't mean, so I want to be clear here, I don't mean to try to deconstruct some of my colleagues that are really working on very good science, right? So there are people who are working on good science for developing principled ways to distinguish between so-called machines and what's special about living organisms. Like that's a good area of diverse intelligence. I'm not saying that shouldn't that shouldn't take place, or that they're driven by anything other than good scientific principles. I'm talking about the folks who have a really visceral reaction, who when I challenge them to be explicit. So tell me, what is the magic that you have, and when did you get it? Both during evolution, during embryogenesis. What do you have, and when does this show up that you think cannot be either in a hybrid form or in synthetic form, done? And what would you do if? I think reading science fiction is a great cure for this, because from the earliest time you understand this scenario, right? You're sitting there at home. This spaceship lands on your front lawn. the door opens, this thing sort of trundles out. It's kind of shiny looking, it's kind of metallic looking, but it sort of comes up to you and it sort of hands you this poem and it says, "Oh man, I'm so happy to meet you. It's been 1,000 years I was waiting to meet you. Many of us died along the way, but we persevered and we made this journey. And here I wrote you this poem, and I'm looking to be friends." And you sort of knock on, and it's kind of metallic, and you say, "So did you guys evolve naturally, or did somebody make you?" And he says, "You mean are we the result of totally random processes, or was our mind crafted by some other mind?" And you say, "Yeah, I'd really like to know." And say, "Why do you want to know that?" Like, "Well, just I'd really like to know because." And in the back of your mind, you're thinking, "What? That if it's the latter, then you're okay with turning it into a vacuum cleaner, right? That's what you're really thinking about." And I mean, I find that just absurd. And we are all stuck in this position of saying, so what criteria are you going to use when you can't do this easy thing? That's why I think AI and language models are such an off-ramp for these discussions, because it's just so easy to dunk on these language models, completely avoiding this issue of that embodiment can take place in other spaces that you have absolutely no idea what physical systems are capable, even if you made it yourself. Yeah.
And even that in itself, I mean, you spoke about it when you said if you use AI to create something, I mean, who really created it? And then you have that wonderful quote where you say, like, nothing was ever created by two men. We're merely sort of just adding upon what's already there.
Yeah. I think we really need to be clear that there are major open questions here, like really fundamental open questions. It's too early to be certain of anything other than, I mean, I think the only thing we can be certain of is that it's very easy to make ethical lapses when you try to draw these distinct boundaries and you have no idea what you're doing.